What's up, everybody? So today I sat down with my good friend Jen, who is a realtor here in Austin, and I've been waiting to record this for a while now because real estate is always all the rage, especially in this dynamic market that we've been in over the last several years. It's really interesting and exciting to talk about and discuss different strategies, not just for the everyday average consumer, buyer or seller, but also for real estate agents across the United States. I think we did a really good job of converging her knowledge in real estate, my knowledge in taxes, and a little bit in real estate as well, with the rentals that I have. And I think there's a lot that you're going to learn from this. Jen is deeply immersed in what she does. It's all she talks about all day, all night. She lives in the area where she prefers to mostly help people buy and sell and also assist landlords. She's kind of all around. She's very personable. It's very easy to connect with her. She's always on your side. She's very good at negotiating. And that's just as far as working with her. But just sitting down to have a conversation, I think it's a very well flowing conversation that you can learn a lot from and have some takeaways. And with that being said, I'll keep it short and sweet. Let's get right into it. We've been wanting to do this for a little bit. We talked about podcasting. Just for the people who don't know and need to know, we met through mutual friends when I moved down to Austin, and I needed a place to live. First with an apartment building, then with a house, then another house, and another house, and
7 doors in. We're doing good.
We're doing okay. So it's been a while now. It's actually just been 2 years since I moved to Austin, by the way. January 5th was
Kind of
2
hard
years.
to believe that it's only been 2 years.
The time has flown, a lot has happened. Just like this guy. But I feel like because I'm an accountant, because you're a realtor, we're just always talking, going back and forth about stuff like this.
Absolutely.
So it only makes sense to let other people hear how ridiculous our claims are.
Absolutely.
And let them judge for
A day in the
themselves.
life of Austin tax.
Tax and
realtor.
real estate. Yeah, absolutely. So just to recap, like what you've helped me with, just so people kind of understand a little bit about what you do too. It's been from personal residence to rental properties to buying and selling those and getting tenants in as well. So
The joys.
yes.
The joys of property management.
The highs and the lows. We've been through it all, especially here in Austin, and it's been a tremendous help to even just be able to bounce ideas off of somebody who gets you.
Totally.
We come from the same place. We think about things a lot in the
The New
same
York
way.
approach in Austin.
Yes. Yeah. You get ahead. We get ahead.
Absolutely
with
get
it.
ahead.
And it's helpful that you had been here for a while already, so you kind of know the markets. You're involved. So with that being said, just kind of jump into your backstory a little bit, because I don't really know much of it either.
Yeah.
Which is like, where did you start off working? Were you always in real estate? How did you get into real estate? Are you going to stay in real estate? So that's
the big questions here.
yeah. It's just a quick synopsis, if you will.
Totally. I mean, I kind of always, I think I identify as an entrepreneur, and I got my real estate license in New York City when I was 18 years old. I got my real estate license, my personal training license, and then also my bartending license. And I was like, something's going to stick. And I didn't know what it was. I guess real estate ended up sticking. But yeah, I got my license at 18. I started working at Douglas Elliman. I went to the biggest office in New York City, and I was like, I want a job. And I remember that one of my, I spoke with a guy, the recruiter there, and I don't think he knew what he got himself into, because I think I was just so young and like hungry, and I was just like so like wanting to learn. So he put me with a big realtor in New York City, and I apprenticed under him for a couple of years, while simultaneously working a couple of other jobs and training and doing kind of like promo work. And then I think that there was something about real estate that just stood out to me, because I think real estate, I love that there's no cap, and I love how dynamic it is. And I love that I can never be bored doing real estate, because there's never a dull moment in real
You
estate.
need to be occupied all the time, obviously.
I maybe do. So it was just really, it was just such an industry that was so dynamic. And I think that I love that. And I think the biggest thing that attracted me to anything that I wanted to do for the long haul was people. And I love people. And I think that when you're helping somebody purchase or invest, there is this personal connection with the process. And I just love that because I love connecting to humans. I love understanding the whys, and I love, you know, really guiding people. And I think that in New York City, it's a little different. Real estate is a little different in New York City.
The rat
New
race of
Yorkers
New York.
are just terrific. I really like my New Yorkers in Austin.
Where in New York were you working mostly? Like what borough, or was it kind of everywhere?
It was a little bit of everything, you know, born and raised in Jamaica, Queens. So I did some work in Queens, but a lot more in the city, a lot more apartments, you know, really highlighting the 700 square foot, $2 million properties that look at another building. I was like, this is not easy to sell, but I'm gonna sell it.
It was New York, like, because I feel like New York is this type of place, like, so Douglas Elliman, huge company, right? Were you fighting for leads? Were they feeding you your own like personal leads? Like, how did that all work?
Oh, heck no. And, you know, and I think that that's also what like really enticed me about real estate. It was like the hustle. Like there's never, nothing really is ever given to you. You know, you can, there's like lead sources, but like when you're a realtor, you take those leads and you handle them. And depending on the teams, and I worked with a great team, and I think that they were able to like kind of guide me on like what to do and who to call and do cold calls. And, you know, you really have to build your sphere, and you have to build your community. And I think that that's the biggest kind of difference in real estate, and I think in any industry, but I think in real estate specifically, a lot of it's like the connecting with different people, and those people then become your community and your business. And I think that that was something that really intrigued me, because I think that naturally that's my inclination, is like to connect with people,
Yeah.
hate people. So having kind of like the means to also make a living doing that was really exciting. But yeah, I think that real estate is definitely a little bit different here in Austin, which is that's awesome.
Good, good. So obviously you're loving it here. I'm assuming it's what you're going to continue to do. What happened with, if you could like give it to us? Hey, Edos, come here, come here, come here, Edos,
Yeah,
come here.
I get puppy hugs.
Well,
I've known Etta since she's just a pup, just a pup. Okay, but I'm not allowed to give you too much attention right now.
Edos, come here, come here, buddy, come here, come down, come here, come, sit,
Fine.
sit. Good
Cuddle
boy.
here.
Good boy. Hopefully we don't have to cut that part out.
It'll be the cue. Maybe it'll be endearing.
Yeah, we'll see. There you go. Good boy. What was I going to ask you? Just kind of like the transition from New York to Austin. Not even if you want to get into why you moved, you don't have to. But also transitioning from the real estate scene there to here. And
No,
and how that
absolutely.
happened.
Well, there was a little bit of a gap because I did end up after New York, you know, just the hustle and bustle of New York City. It's a lot. And I think that I ended up moving to Costa Rica. Spent 3 years in Costa Rica, did the whole barefoot, pregnant, hippie life in Costa Rica and Tamarindo. And just really loved it. But I think my heart was always in real estate. I think that real estate was always, whenever we were looking at cities to move back into the US, I was like, I want somewhere where there is a great like real estate economy. And Austin was just that spot. And so Austin was one of those cities that I think that had the perfect balance of like kind of like that new age, you know, it's young, it's hungry, it's fit. I think a lot of people are attracted to Austin for that like entrepreneurial, a lot of work from home people. So there's just a lot of diversity in like what you can do in Austin. And I think that that's what attracts people to Austin, and that's what attracted me to Austin, and being able to now like kind of build a life and understanding how people connect here in Austin, just having kind of that more modern approach to like a big city. Coming from New York City, everything's so big and everybody's, you know, I don't know, just it's so different.
Yeah, I noticed that when I moved here, that it is very different. But as I've lived here longer, it's different, not so much in the ways that I first thought. Like when I moved here first, I was like, oh my God, everybody's so nice. Everybody's
Yeah,
like, hey y'all, how are you? Like,
Totally,
so,
totally.
and in New York, it's like, you know, stank
It's like I'm
faces.
questioning what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Why are you smiling at me?
Home of the side eye and the resting bitch face, right?
100%.
And then when you get to Austin, everybody's nice. But then on a big level, it felt like Austin was such, it was such a melting pot that it was kind of like a little bit fake. largely, and I'm not about that, but once you get your crew, as with anywhere else, it's nice because there's just more space here and you feel more relaxed and calm. So
Totally. And I think people want to connect here, and I think that that's kind of the meat and
yeah.
potatoes of Austin. I think that people, because it's such a transplant city, and like there are people who, have been in Texas maybe, but like Austin specifically is such like a transient place, like a lot of people come here for college and either stay, or like a lot of people just like want to build here, right? I think that it's just attract a certain type of person. And I think that those people do look for connection and they look for community. And, just in the 6 years, I think I'm here 5 or 6 years now, the amount of community that I've been able to build in Austin is just unheard of, in other places in the world. And so it's been really nice and it's treated me well. And I think that the real estate's obviously changed since when I moved here. It was always really strong, but I think that, we've gone through kind of all of the waves of it. But I think Austin is just the place that I want to be. I want to set up roots, and that's kind of why I think that real estate is such an important part of that process for me, because I get to see the market and the areas grow around me. And I love to place my friends and my community into areas that match them and what they're looking for. So it's just been really fun to start to, put pieces of the puzzle together.
So an influencer of sorts, huh?
Sort
Just
of.
telling people what to do and where to live.
Like, you want to live here. You don't want to live here.
I think it's also huge that like you're raising young kids here, so that like opens up a lot of perspective to you, like as you go through both of those things.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have a 5 and 7-year-old now, and it's just one of those cities that it's so nice that you can really have you can build out exactly what you want, right? You want like a little bit more of the nature and like closer by the green belts. And there's a part in Austin for that. You want great schools. You want, alternative schooling. You want whatever it is that you're looking for. I think Austin has a lot to offer. And it's just been really nice to be able to, talk to people and friends and people who are moving here and kind of really dissect what they're looking for and where like they would be most happy in Austin, and, being able to guide and, the people that I, I want it closer to me. So I'm a little biased.
Sure. So the people who do you wrong, you tell them, hey, I think it's time to sell.
I think this area up here is great. It's okay. An hour and a half away.
We'll see each other all the time. I mean, an hour and a half in Texas is like a 15-minute walk in New York. So
exactly.
So that's fine. All right, cool. So that's probably a pretty good segue into what I want to talk about next. But before that, I did want to ask, like, for anybody who's trying to get into the real estate game, what was the path for you besides walking into that Douglas Elliman office? Like, what else did you have to do in terms of studying or certifications? Did you know you wanted to get certified in multiple states, or did you just kind of do that as you went? How long did it take you? Like those types of questions.
No, totally. Real estate in every state is a little bit different. New York City, it's super easy. I don't know what it is now, but you can pull it off in a weekend in terms of those classes. I think in real estate school, they teach you more of the like laws and the regulations and the things and fair housing and all the things that you need to know for contracts. Like in New York, we don't really write contracts, right? We outsource that into, we have an attorney to handle those documentations. Here in Texas, we have promulgated forms. So we are actually filling out some of those contracts. So in Texas, it's actually a little bit harder to get your real estate license compared to other states. Probably one of the harder states. A lot of states do have reciprocity. Texas doesn't have reciprocity with many other states. So I had to redo my licensing here in Texas. I always knew that I wanted to do it in a couple of different states, especially just being somebody who's like moved around and traveled. Like I want to be able, and so I have a very unique perspective on like kind of moving around and figuring out where to land and what is important to you. So I think that real estate looks very different when you're starting from the ground up. What they don't tell you about getting out of real estate school is that's not how you run your business, right? Like that's not the business part of it. And that just comes from a lot of trial and error. See what works, figuring out the different strategies that you use to get in front of your consumer. And just kind of building, and depending on where you are, that looks different in so many different places, right? What that looks like in New York City is so different than what that looks like here in Texas or in Austin specifically, or in Houston, if you wanted to kind of zoom out, or even more different than if you look in California. So I think when it comes to building a real estate business, it really is just more figuring out what's your kind of niche, what's your what's your strong suit? And I think that depending on what that is, that's kind of what you double down on, right? Like there's some guys that cold call for days, and that's how they built their entire business. And they're just on the phones, calling neighborhoods, calling people who are interested. Other people, it's building community, right? For me, that was always it, right? That was always something that felt very natural, hosting events and bringing people together. And providing resources for people, I think was the biggest way that I always thought, right? I don't need anything from you. I just want to provide value to you. And if you end up wanting to buy, cool, great. That's amazing. And I'm here for you. And I'm the person that's going to give you the truth, and I'm going to get you the best deal because I'm a New Yorker and I don't pay retail for anything. So it's just, I try to look at business that way. It's like you give. When you have sue me, is you chase your own tail for long enough, you figure it out. And I think that that's kind of, and that's the strategy that I always give for any business model, right? You like give resources and you give your service. And I think that things come back, and maybe that's a little bit of a hippie in me, but
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I'm the same
that.
way. Always like
Totally.
if you call me, you're going to get a lot out of me. It works.
It works.
And it makes you feel good at the end.
100%. And I think that that's the best. And I don't think that I can do a job that wasn't fulfilling to me, right? Like that I didn't get to like just have a conversation with you. And like, I don't care if you buy a house or you like don't decide to invest in Austin, or you like, I'm going to be honest with you. It's like, what are your goals? Like I've gotten on a phone with actually a high school friend that called me and said, hey, you sell real estate in Austin? I'm like, yeah. And it's like, yeah, I would love to talk to you about it. And we hopped on an hour call, and we were just kind of shooting the shit and like having this conversation, and like with what his goals are, Austin was in the market for him, right? And I was like, look, we can look outskirts, but like I think you also have other markets, and depending on how much you're looking to invest, like this might not be the market for you right now in this time, So, and that was a great conversation, and he ended up sending me a lead after the fact. So it's been.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Edos, get down. Get down. Come on.
Okay.
Come here.
Cut him later.
Come here. Come here. We'll have playtime. We'll have playtime. Get down. Get down. Get down. Good boy. Down.
Yeah. So, and it always comes back to you. So I think that when you're thinking about business and you're thinking about growing, especially a service-based industry, the way that we are in, it's just really giving and like giving your best foot forward and doing the best you can and providing value where you can provide value. And I think naturally different areas of your life, it starts to come together. And I think that that's the beauty in real estate, right? Like everybody is kind of your client and your consumer.
Yeah.
Same thing with taxes.
It's like every service-based industry,
Exactly.
right? And even like retail, if you do it right, like these days,
100%.
you can't do the cold calling thing. You can't be a nasty sales agent. You've got to
100%.
build relationships with all your clients or potential clients or whoever.
Yeah.
So before I get into talking about business and entrepreneurship and all that, Austin market, right? Because that's where we're at, and that's what you know best right now.
Yeah.
What's the outlook? Good time to buy, bad time to buy? Are more people renting? Are more people selling or buying? Like what's the real deal?
Let me get my crystal ball. I think
inside
that's what I need right now. It's one of those things where, and I think it's like the same like ideology, and I am no financial advisor, but like sometimes you're sitting on the sidelines and just waiting to get in, right? And I don't think that there's ever 100% a perfect time to buy, and we never know what's happening, especially in this crazy world that we live in. Mm-hmm. You never know what's going to happen. In my personal opinion, I think we've seen the lowest coming into last year. I think that with the rates at where there were and kind of the uncertainty in the country, I think that people were just on the sidelines. Even coming into this new year, I'm seeing a little bit of an uptick in buyer confidence. I think that prices are stabilizing a little bit. I think inventory demands have started to come up a little bit. So I think that we're getting to a place where it is a really good time to buy. I think that we're seeing that buyers specifically are getting really good deals on properties as well, because I think that sellers have been just kind of waiting to see if things would come back to 2021 and 2022, which they're not going to come back to that, especially a city like Austin that's just absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, some of the home prices here went up 50% in one year, which is just unheard of. So we have seen a correction over the last year and a half to 2 years. And I think that coming into 2025, I think that there's a lot more optimism in the market. And I think that people that are waiting on the sidelines are realizing that there's like no way to know when rates are going to come down, right? And I think that right now is one of those unique times in the market where you really can kind of take your time, look at properties, really do a good analysis on the properties. Rates are still a little bit high, but historically they're not as high as it has been in other times. So I think that if you're in the market to buy, whether a personal residence or an investment property, I think that there's always options. And I think that that was the case 2 years ago. And I think that that's the case today. Because anybody who tells you they know exactly when it's like, right now is the time to buy, whether that's going to come down another 5 to 10%. It's just really hard to know. So I think right now it's just more so thinking about what your goals are and we can sit down and have kind of conversations about it, right? Like if it's a long-term hold for you, I think it'll be just fine. And I think it's an amazing time to buy. But, if you want to buy a property now and sell in 6 months, is that the best time to buy? I don't know. I don't have that magic ball. So I think it's just really depending on what your goals are as an investor, as somebody how long you're going to be in a property. And we help our clients kind of guide through, asking these questions and filling out these questionnaires and figuring out what their needs are, and kind of working backwards from there to see, hey, because I'd rather tell you, this is not the time to sell your house. And I'll get that business a year from now because I'm in the long game. I'm not in the immediate gratification. You want to sell your house? Right now is definitely the best time to sell your house. That's not the business that I run. I'm always going to tell you like, hey, I think that depending on what your goals are, like, what do you want to do? And I think that based on that and based on my opinion, I'm personally looking for an investment property this year, as we've discussed. So I do think it's a good time to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll take this time to like give my opinion,
Yeah,
purely
yeah,
opinion
yeah,
on
yeah,
this.
yeah.
I feel like it's a unique time that we're like recording this, especially because it felt to me like everybody was just waiting for this election to be over. It didn't matter which way the election was going to go, and waiting for all of that to unravel. And now things are going to
100%.
change because there's just always uncertainty. You don't know how to plan and what to plan for.
100%.
Either way that election was going to go was going to be fine as long as people knew what they were planning for next. And everybody sat on the sidelines for that. I feel like I would have done so myself. Edos, come here. Edos, come.
100%. Because I think that when there's like all of these questions, right, then people are like, there's so many things on the list that you have to go through. And I think that and I think in general, especially for like my investor clients, first time investors is a big, big clientele for me. People who are looking to get into the market and start long-term wealth building. Whenever I'm thinking about those people, a lot of them are like, oh, I don't know. And they're like kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I think after the election, I think there was always, and again, it didn't matter which way it went, but it was a little bit more certainty and like, okay, at least this is stabilized. And
that's exactly what it is. Like when I had the first property that I had, in the Poconos, and we got it during COVID. It was great because there was a boom in Airbnbs because nobody could fly anywhere. And then there's always going to be some sort of like current events situation that happens that shifts things. Like at that time when I was getting ready to sell, the war in Ukraine broke out. And when war breaks out, people tend to do certain things with their money. And for me, I understood it was a good time to sell because I think people might travel less. They might travel to other places, but also usually people want to like store their money in an asset.
100%.
It made sense to sell. We ended up making a sizable profit on that place, luckily. Then, there's elections, there's other wars, there's all the stuff that goes on. And every time it gives, especially investors, it makes them think, like you said, the people who are more like for a short-term outlook, maybe both short and long-term, not just your like family, who's going to live in a place for 10 to 15 years, or forever. What else did I want to say on that?
And also to talk about that, like people, and I think a lot of people, even when they're buying primary residence, they're like, I'm going to be here for 10 years. I'm not going to move. But life happens, right?
100%.
And like, and I think that that's also like like a lot of the people that I purchased 2 years ago, for example, in 2022, they were like, I'm going to stay here. This is my house for the next 5 to 10 years. And, I'm getting calls now of like, hey, I want to sell. And like, and it's fine. And it's one of those things where like life changes, but a lot of things are just out of our control, right? Because of all of the things, all the variables that come into housing, right? And I think housing is one of those, such a dynamic thing, and so many things are influenced.
It is, especially today, and especially I think for the younger population, like even our generation, because you don't know about those things that life has to throw at you just yet, right? So you might think you're staying for a while, but then something happens with, family, or you don't like the school district, or your property taxes ended up being too high, or
100%.
or whatever. It is
or changing job,
changing,
or,
especially in today.
India,
especially in today's climate where you're like, I can work from home, I can work remotely. Everyone's an entrepreneur today, it seems like. So
100%.
all these things do change, and it's worth considering that for sure. So I mean, as far as good or bad time to buy, it sounds like if you're for sure sticking around for the long term, maybe wait a little bit and see how things unravel this next year or so. And if you're buying for the short term, as long as the numbers make sense, the numbers make sense, and then you deal with it later, right? They really, I can't imagine them getting much worse at
I
this
just
point.
can't
And it
imagine.
depends on the market too, like, right?
Totally.
But we're talking about Austin, I guess,
And I
specifically.
think Austin specifically, and I think Austin specifically is a very unique market, right? Because of all the entrepreneurs and all that kind of young, like hungry entrepreneurial, like energy that the city has, right? So people are just very like, oh yeah, one moment I'm here and the next moment I'm not. So like I think that Austin specifically has kind of taken on kind of its own mini economy of like, I think that there is a possibility that things just, certain changes happen or some things companies come in here. I think that there can be a huge like spike in our property values. And then I think also then, there's so many variables in Austin in terms of corporate companies coming into Austin. And I think that that's kind of also something to think about when you're looking at like different markets is like what drives that market, right? Like what drives Austin is a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of tech companies. So like even just with all those layoffs there has been, so it's kind of affected those more outskirt properties, right? So if you're looking at before, you would go into Manor, right? Which is a little bit, it's probably 35, 40 minutes outside of downtown Austin. That was exploding during COVID because people were like, it's just, that's where the city's going to grow. And those are the places that kind of got hit a little bit harder, right? Because the proximity. So I think right now is kind of a unique time also to get proximity to Austin, right? Because you have these neighborhoods that are like 10 to 15 minutes from downtown Austin that are still kind of in that up and coming phase, which a lot of people don't know that, right? So it's like finding those like little pockets of real estate, right? Even just kind of like where we live in like the hill country, like there's these pockets that are up and coming and that people think that are far away, but they're not that far away. And, I think that there's a lot of options for people depending on what you're looking at. And I think that there's deals to be had. But again, it's just a matter of what your goals are, if they're short term, if they're long term.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, actually, because the more I think about this and the more like I research also fairly frequently, it seems like the market is flooded. But what I feel like is happening, it's like growth of any city, right? Like Austin, rapid growth. It's a hot spot. People want to come here because they want to live here, or they want to do like a short work from home trip here, or all the bachelorette and bachelor parties that come visit and they're like, oh, I love this freaking place. I want to live here. And then the cycle happens, right? Like you lived here for a little bit. Now you figured out what you really want from life. Maybe you're homesick. Maybe you miss your friends. You want to move back. People didn't want to follow you here. Or, bunch of corporations came in and came out, right? Because they figured whatever, they're trying to navigate their stuff. Economy has been a little bit shaky in terms of employment. So all these things happen. And I think it's a natural big city, a growth city thing. And now it's stabling out. And I think we're figuring it out now over the next like year or two. It'll make a lot of sense. But to the point of the flooded market, because it seems to be flooded both from a seller's perspective and a landlord's perspective for rents. I think it's a great time to find what you really want
100%.
and plant your feet there.
As a buyer, I think right now there's just so many options. And I think a lot of people, even people there, like you said, the rental market's flooded because, a lot of people purchased in 2021 and 2022 when things were at the height. And now they're coming back to me and they're like, hey, Jen, like, I want to sell. Like, I have a new job opportunity or this or that. Or like, I want to upsize. I have a family. And we're looking at the values, right? And they have like adjusted about 15 to 20%, depending on the areas. And so now we're seeing a huge influx of the renter market. And that rental market has dropped prices a little bit because now there's so much inventory. But there's not as much inventory on the sales side. So it's like, I think coming into the spring, my prediction is that we're going to see a lot more sellers coming into the market because they're like, we can't wait on the sidelines forever. Like, we don't want to necessarily be renters because we want to be able to purchase something else. So I think that what we're going to see this spring is we're going to see a lot more inventory come in. And I think that when more inventory comes in, more buyers are going to come in. Because I think those buyers that have just been sitting on the sidelines waiting like, oh, wait, interest rates maybe will come down. we can figure that out, right? Like we can refinance. There's 2-1 buy downs that we can talk about. And that's something that we've been, discussing with our clients. So I think that there's a lot more creativity that I don't think that people truly understand the way that we can structure deals. And that's my superpower. And I think that my clients really appreciate that, because I think that if we can think about what your long-term and your short-term goals are, there's ways to structure deals no matter what time it is to be able to make it work for what your goals are.
What's up, everybody? I just wanted to interrupt for a quick second to say, please, if you're enjoying this, like this video, bookmark it, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me a lot. Share this with your friends. I appreciate you all as always. And now back to the video. I do want to say also, this is a good time to kind of plug this, which is what I always say, like, you need good professionals by your side, and it makes such a big difference when you have them, especially in this market that like you're predicting, which, I mean, it's not even so much of a prediction anymore because it's kind of happening, at least from my perspective as like a layman. Bless you. Unmute that. So we have a saying in Russian, "Na pravdu," is when you sneeze, and this means it's the truth, what you just said. Yeah. It's like one of those superstition bullshit things. Someone's gonna like that. Oh, what was I gonna say? Yeah, so you need good professionals. Like in this market where it's gonna supply and demand, right? Supply is gonna go up, so the people who have the demand, they're gonna have more power because the supply is huge, and so a lot of people today are like, oh, everything's on Zillow, everything's on Realtor.com, whatever website they're using. I'm just gonna go do this, negotiate with the sellers myself. But the value in having someone like you, and that's from experience, like I've seen you walk in and I feel like I could have done most of the stuff myself, but there are a few nuances that I'm not equipped for. And it's very important, and that'll save you in the long term. So that's just a plug for professionals, not just the real estate professional, which is important, but like I always say, your mortgage lender also, they can make a world of difference.
Absolutely.
Especially when they have like the right mindset that like me, you and Kristen share, which is, give value up front. Don't worry about it. They'll come back or they'll send somebody. Like just help the people out.
It's not transactional. It's not. And I think a good service person, and I think that that's always the way. And I think, I work with you personally on my own taxes, and, I think, and then Kristen is one of our lenders who was on another, podcast for yours. I think that it's also the community that which you work. Because when you're working with a good professional, their community of people who are there connecting with you is also that community. And that provides more resources for you. So like having a good team is so important. And I think that real estate is one of those things where we live in a time where information is, like you said, you can go on Zillow and you can find a house and you can ask to speak to, there's so many ways to kind of get around working with a professional at these days. But I think the value that I provide to my clients is that it's not only just about like opening that door. That is the smallest part of my job, right? It's about how do I know how to negotiate on this property? How can I get you the best deal possible? How do I structure the contract to make sure that it's serving your best needs, whether that's for closing dates, whether that's for lease backs, right? Whether that's for, if it's an investor, how do you retain tenants, right? Whatever it is that you need in this specific scenario, like some deals are super cut and dry, right? A lot of deals are like, hey, like we're able to submit an offer and that offer works perfectly for you and it's pretty straightforward. But there's other deals that do require a lot more complexities and a lot more strategy on it. And just being in the market, something that I've spent thousands of hours doing, I know off the cuff, I understand how to do these things versus, kind of working with somebody a little bit newer. Sometimes that becomes a little bit more challenging because they haven't seen those things, right? Like I've been doing real estate for over 10 years now. Like I have seen a lot. And having that perspective on deals is where my value lies.
Yeah. And from personal experience, it's also about knowing your audience, right? Like, so we did a few deals here and it's like, two of the realtors that we dealt with on the seller side were fine and normal, and then one was a complete jerk. You couldn't get anything out of her.
Absolutely.
They lied to us about a bunch of things.
Absolutely.
So, and again, like you will be able to recognize that likely sooner than I can because you're dealing with these people all the time. So, again, that value in that, and choose your professionals wisely and take it from there. All right, so I think we settled on kind of always a good time to buy if you know what you're doing. All right. So on that note, though, in terms of buying, investing, I think that the other component that some people lack, especially when they are investors or are trying to become investors, or even if they're real estate agents, is strategizing financially and from a tax perspective. So I think a couple of things that we talked about going over were those strategies in terms of, how does capital gains tax work? How does it work if you're an active investor versus a passive investor? 1031 exchanges, depreciation and how that plays a role, and how you can layer these various things to optimize your situation and maybe make the deal make more sense for you if you're looking at it the right way. And then the other thing, and this was something that I wanted to touch on just because I've gotten these questions recently, is house flipping and the differences between a flip versus a rental. So I'm just going to jump in there and you just interject if you have any questions or comments on it. So what a lot of people don't understand is how capital gains tax might work. That's an easy one. Short-term capital gains, you hold an asset for under a year, buy and sell, that'll be short-term capital gains rate. At the federal level, which is all we'll talk about, that's going to be whatever your ordinary tax bracket is. So you have your income from work, you have your income from business, whatever tax bracket that puts you into, the gain from your sale, you will add on top of that, and whatever percentage it is what you'll get taxed on short-term capital gains. Long-term capital gains is when you hold for over a year. And the IRS has a different set of tax brackets for long-term capital gains that's based on your total household income, including the value of the sale. But it's just a different percentage bracket, and they go 0, 15, and 20%. And the majority of people that you and I will deal with are in that 15% tax bracket. It's important to note because it might be somebody who makes $500,000 a year and they're in the 37% bracket federally for their regular income. They won't be like that for that sale that they make, unless it's like a huge profit on that sale. And again, it's not the amount you sell for, it's the profit on the sale. Another thing that people miss, I didn't even have this in my mind before. It just popped into my head that I want to mention. So deal with this with my clients all the time. When you buy a house, save your closing disclosures, or if you have a good relationship with your realtor and your lender and your title company, make sure somebody's saving that, because what a lot of people either don't do, or their professionals won't do for them, or they don't know upon the time that they sell, is some of your closing costs from when you purchase the property can also be deducted from the profit that you make on selling that property, in addition to improvements.
That was a big tip for a lot of my clients. I was like, don't leave, and I'll send it in an email now so everybody has it and they can kind of reference it.
Yeah, and as you know, there could be thousands of dollars, with the mortgage origination fees, and then you have those title company fees and certain other taxes that you pay as well that aren't deductible at the time. You can add that to what's called your basis in the home, which is your purchase price plus these closing costs plus any major improvements you make to the home over time. So that when you sell, if you bought a house for 500, you sold for $1 million, your profit's not 500 now. It's going to be less by the amount
depending on how much you spend on those closing
costs and then your upgrades to the house. It's very, very important to note. 1031 exchanges. You can go really deep on these, and I actually think it's important to have a 1031 expert work with you
100%.
on those types of sales, because they can go wrong very easily.
100%.
There's
and the title companies that you use is so important. Making sure that you're working with a title company that understands that process, that you have already opened files with them so they know exactly what you're doing, is such an important part of that.
Absolutely. Especially for the average person, not even the average person, most people, we're not on top of our stuff and deadlines, and you need somebody to be on top of deadlines for you. So with 1031 exchanges, you can't just go sell your place and then go buy another place and expect that you're not going to pay gains taxes on the profit of the sale in the first place. Not only does it have to be done within 6 months of selling your first place, you have to buy the other place and have a place lined up, but you also have to have an escrow agent to hold the cash from the sale for you, which is where a title company or an attorney's office or a combination of the two can come into play. Super important to know that.
Absolutely. And then also making sure that you get that list, because you have to make sure that you have on that paper that you're going to be submitting, it has to be one of the addresses, which is something that I work with a lot of my clients with as well.
Exactly. So don't go into that thing blind thinking it's going to be all dandy. You have to have everything lined up, ready to go. And the other thing that people don't know, because they'll just either assume or they only watch the video online that gave half the story, which is very common. is you can't do it with a primary residence. This is for investment properties only.
Absolutely.
It can be if you're in like a house hack situation where you have, multifamily property, you live in one of the units and rent out the rest, that will work. But it can be one where you live primarily.
Absolutely.
Or like a vacation home that you have. So it's very important to keep that in mind. That's 1031's just kind of like general scope.
Can you touch upon the limits also? I mean, that's something that's a lot of people ask me is like the 250 and the 500 rule.
Okay,
For like couples, like that's something that I get asked all the time.
Yeah. So that's not 1031 exchange. That's different. That's
that was-
exclusion on the gain of the sale of your primary home, right? So the rule is this: as long as you live in your house for any 2 of the previous 5 years, they don't have to be consecutive 2 years, but any 2 out of the previous 5 years, once every 5 years, you can take an exclusion on the profits from the sale of your home. If you're a single filer, it's up to 250K in profit. If you're a married filing joint filer, it's up to 500K of profit is excluded from determining what you're going to pay tax on. So if you buy a house, just to use very simple numbers, nothing extra, $500,000 was your basis in the house. It's what you bought it for, plus your closing costs and everything. That $1 million, what you sold it for, and you're filing with your spouse that year. You lived in that house at least 2 of the previous 5, have not used this exclusion during that time frame. You don't have any profit on the sale. You still want to report it though on your tax return. That's important because the IRS will likely catch wind that that sale happened, but they don't know about these other things. So you just want to claim things up front. And again, if you have good planning going on, then you'll be good with that.
Absolutely.
And there are exceptions to that 2-year rule also, like if there's like medical necessity that you had to move out, or if there's like work relocation that is necessary and you had to move out, then maybe it could be less than 2 years of living there.
Right.
So yeah, and again, planning, talk to somebody before you make that move and sell the place.
Absolutely.
So that was that what you were talking about, exclusion on the sale of a home, of a primary home. Let me touch on house flipping real quick so people understand the difference. So this is for investors. There's long-term renting, there's short-term renting, and there's house flipping. That's generally the 3 things that people are doing, short of like development, which we're not going to touch on. House flipping is when you buy a home with the intention of renovating it, doing something to it that's going to increase the value of that home, and selling it quickly. Normally, the goal is to do that in under a year. It's a short-term transaction. It is not considered an investment property. This is considered a business. That house is considered inventory to you.
Absolutely.
The main difference here is that when you sell that place and you have a profit, you're not dealing with capital gains taxes anymore. You are dealing with business, self-employed taxes on that place. So very important for people to keep that in mind because the taxes that you pay can be way greater. There are other things that come into play, like if you're running any other ordinary business, your ordinary business expenses, your travel to the place, your costs of the car,
you're able to write off a lot of those.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So again, you need to plan ahead of time because especially with house flippers, it's all about the bottom line. You got to do things quickly and you got to make sure the numbers make sense. You've got to calculate these things ahead of time in terms of like the tax implications specifically. So that's what I wanted to mention there.
Yeah. With house flipping, I think that's also a lot of people think that they're going to purchase and there's going to make these huge profits, but it's also so important to make sure that you know what your bottom line is and what your costs are specifically. Because what I've noticed a lot of people do is they come in from out of state, right? And they have kind of expected costs based on where they live, right? And then they come somewhere like Texas where maybe things are a little bit different or in other states. And I think that they don't estimate exactly how much things are going to cost to be able to flip these properties. And a lot of times there's a lot more of a break even than people assume they are, unless this is something that you're used to doing or you're working with a professional that can actually gauge those prices for you. So making sure that you like are super informed whenever we're doing, because we went in an age where everybody was wanting to house flip and, it was the Chip and Joanna Gaines kind of era of just purchasing a house and fixing it up and then reselling it and making all this profit. That's changed a lot.
Is that the Waco people?
Yeah. yeah.
Wacko.
Wacko. The place is attracted to cults. It's okay. I'm about that cult.
Yeah, that's fine one to be a part of. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And aside from that, again, current events impacts everything. COVID happened, cost of supplies and labor and everything went up like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely set your
And
expectations.
I was on the other side of that, where it's like I was also representing some like people who were looking to sell their flips, right? They were like, I was coming in and they were like, okay, I expected to sell, and those houses weren't selling. And it's because right now you're and figuring out kind of what your costs are in that area, right? Like, are you the highest price, and what's the value that you're providing if you're the highest price, right? Like, you're really needing to create a product that is exemplary, that it's going to attract a certain buyer. But a lot of times they're putting lipstick on a pig because they think that they can get away with it and then charge these premiums, and they're just not getting these houses sold. So
Yeah.
it's something to be mindful. House flipping is a business, but you need to have strategy with that.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand, right? It's a business. That's the most important thing. It's not a long-term play.
Yeah.
And with every extra month that you hold that place, your cost gets significantly higher.
100, especially most people are doing hard money loans, or they're doing kind of a little bit more creative financing with a lot of those deals.
Yes.
And then they're financing a lot of those out of pocket expenses. So it's just, it's something that can drain if you know how to do it right. It could be very rewarding, but if you don't, it's a tricky thing. And I see a lot of people get in trouble with it.
Yeah. So I think that's good on house flipping, but that was a great point what you said for sure. Now the rest of investing, which is short-term, long-term rentals, and I'm going to try to gear this a little bit more towards realtors or people in the real estate space specifically, because at least as the current tax laws are written, the benefits can be, insanely significant for them. So the way it works, and try to dumb it down a little bit for the viewership, is you buy a house with the intention of renting it, right? You expect to have rental income. You also expect to have certain expenses. Most people are going to buy the place with a mortgage. So they're going to have mortgage interest, that's an expense. They're going to have property taxes, likely, that's an expense. They might have HOA dues, that's an expense. Maintenance, cleaning services, certain repairs that they might have to do, improvements to the house. Am I missing anything? I don't know, snow plowing or landscaping. So all
Management costs.
management costs, yes, that could be a big one. Normally, you're getting into that game because you want to be cash flowing every month, right? So you cash in your pocket at least a little bit. The way I understand this thing is, if you're in a metro area, you expect a little less cash flow, but more appreciation of the property. If you're not in a metro area, more suburban, urban area, less urban area, then you're looking for more cash flow because the property might not appreciate so much. The problem that can come into play when you have cash flow is you got to pay taxes potentially on that cash. So in rental real estate, one of the big expenses that we take, which is a quote unquote paper expense, your pocket doesn't feel it, but your tax return does, is depreciation. And that's the big player. And that's how, the rich save on taxes. And that's how people in real estate pay no taxes, is depreciation. The way it works, we'll use a long-term rental residential property as an example, is so you have your rental income, you have all these other expenses we mentioned, and then depreciation. Depreciation normally is the value of the house minus the value of the land that it sits on, because land is not depreciated, so that value divided by 27 and a half years is your annual depreciation expense that you take. Now, what is depreciation and why is it 27 years? Depreciation is the IRS accounting for your asset. Everything deteriorates, right? Your car does, your house does, we do, whatever. And the IRS sets standards for roughly how long it takes for certain things to lose their value until you need to either dispose of them or renovate them, renew them. With the structure of a home, they deem that it's 27 and a half years. With certain other things like cars, for example, will be 5 years, and the list goes on and on. That depreciation can be quite large if you think about it. And just to use an easy example, because it's 27 years, you have a $270,000 home over 27 years, $10,000 a year is your depreciation expense. That can make the difference between you having cash flow profit on paper versus not having that and not having to pay taxes on that property. Furthermore, if you show a loss on that property, depreciation is bless you. If your depreciation is higher, adding on to your expenses than your rental income, you might have a loss. That loss might help you to offset your other income, might help you. That's important to know the differences. So when somebody who's an ordinary W-2 employee, they don't have really anything else going on in terms of like entrepreneurship or real estate activities, they always ask, like, what are strategies that I can use to lower my tax bill? And there unfortunately are not many. You can contribute to a retirement account. You can contribute to a 529 college savings plan. You can do a few things like that. Have kids, get a child tax credit. It doesn't help that much. Financially.
It'll cost you a little bit more.
The kids are great, but it's going to be rough on your pockets. So the rule is, when you have a rental property and you have a loss on paper, if you make under 150K a year in your household, whether you're single or married, up to $25,000 of those losses from the rental, you can deduct against your W-2 income. So it reduces your W-2 income from the year, meaning you should have paid less in taxes than you probably did, meaning you'll either get a refund, or if you know this is happening, you'll adjust your withholdings throughout the year to not pay in so much through your paychecks. Super helpful.
Totally.
Okay. Something to keep in mind is that 150K these days is not in a very high tax bracket. So with the deductions you're getting on the losses you're allowed to take, the tax savings are not that crazy either. It'll help, not a lot. If you make over 150,000, you can still show those losses and declare them, and you want to, you just can't utilize them until either your income drops below that level or you sell the place. When you're either materially participating in a property, materially meaning you're hands-on, you're there all the time, the rule is you have to be putting at least 500 hours a year of work into that. For comparison, that's like a complete part-time job during the year, right? And you have to be performing significant duties there. Or
how do you prove those duties?
You keep a log. You keep a log of everything you're doing. I had to go and repair this. I did it myself. I had to go to the store and get the stuff. I had to do some research. I took some classes. Whatever you're doing, and specifically keep in mind for that one property. That's very important to keep in mind for the next thing I'm going to mention. So always keep a log, speak to the tax professional, make sure we have templates for all this. Now, the other classification is being a real estate professional, which is huge right now. If you're considered to be a real estate professional, which a few rules, not all of them, is 750 hours a year of participation in real estate activities, which realtors are very likely to meet with all the work that they do. It has to account for more than 50% of all the work you do the entire year. So generally speaking, unless you're working 18 hours a day every day, if you have a regular 9 to 5, it's tough to meet that professional status.
100%.
If you do, however, meet that status, and by the way, it's an aggregate for all of the real estate work you do, not just for one property that you're managing, your losses are unlocked, meaning there's no limitations on them. So if you understand how to leverage depreciation well and create losses on your rental properties, you can offset potentially all of your other income from business or from work or from investments, just like, stock investments, brokerages, etc. Maybe you're collecting retirement income and you want to offset that as well. So all these things, and it could be huge, because again, now that $150,000 income is no longer a limit. You could be making $500,000 a year and offsetting most or all of it, depending how many properties you have. And then these things get layered. So, and this is obviously getting a bit complex and convoluted, which is why you want to always talk to a professional about it before you get into it.
Because it's so funny, because when you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, like, this is like off the cuff and on the back of your head, it's so easy, but like kind of trying to explain this to people who don't understand the tax strategies and the implications of being able to own properties and, now owning a brokerage and being able to tell my agents, like, hey, this is the way that you structure, makes such a huge difference. And it's such a good point that you brought up with kind of the benefit if you are a real estate professional, which is, obviously now owning a brokerage is a big thing that I, advocate for my agents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's huge for realtors. It's huge for realtors, and too many of them don't take advantage of it, either because they're just wasting their money, or they just can't grasp what this means for them. Totally. Or I don't know, they just think they're not savvy investors, or just they don't have good advice. The one layer that I like to talk about, because it can make a massive difference in your early years of owning a property, is cost segregation studies. Cost segregation studies, here's what they do. So back to depreciation, the IRS sets a life class for all different types of assets: house, car, computer, phone, floors, appliances, your roof, and so on. And it's all different types of years. The additional key is that the structure of your home, you are tied to that 27.5 year rule. You can't do anything about it. Other asset classes with shorter lifespans, you can accelerate the depreciation for them, meaning even if it's a 5 year class, you may be able to take everything in the first or second year. So it speeds up the amount of deductions that you have. And especially like say you had a good year this year, right? Like you got a big bonus at work, or you made a few more sales in real estate than you thought you would, and your commission checks are rolling in. Whatever that case may be for you, having that accelerated depreciation can really help prevent you from getting into a higher tax bracket and
Can
getting
you give
murdered.
examples of this?
Yes.
So like people.
Yeah. So tough with specific numbers because I didn't come ready with them, but I'll give you an example. So like one of the properties that I bought is a $550,000 property sitting on, I want to say, about $50,000 worth of land. Okay, so like I said, land is not depreciable. The property is, though. On top of that, 550K for the property, and it, by the way, doesn't matter if you took a mortgage for it or not. It's what the value was when you purchased it. I had to do a bunch of renovations, so there's been about another $100,000 in investments in that property since purchasing it. Normally, I would take that 650K, what it comes out to be, divided by the 27.5 years, and every year that would be my depreciation expense. So what is that, like 25,000 a year, something like that. The rents on that place come out to much more than that. So at the end of the year, and so this is like in a more rural area, higher cash flow, you need more deductions. Doing a cost segregation study there will separate all of the components of that house in every unit that it has, down to the electrical wiring, like every component that goes in. Yes. So there are certain criteria that are input for this calculation. We do research, we do a study, we take photos, we look at what's what, how much square footage, how many bedrooms, how much square footage of flooring, what type of appliances do you have there, how old is the house, so we know what kind of wiring was likely used there, plumbing, etc. And it breaks it down into all these components. So in my first year, instead of being able to take $25,000, for example, in depreciation expense, I'm able to take like $200,000 in depreciation expense. That's insane. Now,
Absolutely.
I don't make $1 million a year, but if I did make $1 million a year, that would
Taxable income.
that would be like 70 plus $1,000 in tax savings that year, just from that one property, just from that strategy. And I will still be able to take a big chunk in the second year and the third year, and it will diminish with time. But that's also why when you're in this space, you know that you don't just one and done. You're trying to continue to replicate.
Absolutely.
Purchase more, refinance, add more, refinance, add more, hopefully, as you're digging into the equity in that place.
Absolutely.
So again, just to emphasize, instead of $25,000 a year in depreciation expense, which might save me, I don't know, $8,000 in taxes, we're talking about 10 times that nearly. So
Totally.
insane. And again, due to those tax savings, I can probably buy another place the next year with that money
100%.
and do the same. And you start small and you go bigger, and you work up and you get used to it. So I think that's huge.
No, that's so huge.
Especially for the real estate community.
Oh, 100%. And I think that it's also so important to be able to have somebody to kind of turn to in this, in this sort of study, because I think it's really important to kind of dissect how, and that's why when we were saying, like, is it a good time to buy? What are your strategies? These are things that you can take into account based on what your other income is, right? And like where you're earning your money. How do we leverage real estate to work for you, not against you?
Exactly. And in a market like this, with the mortgage rates being high, this might be that life saving strategy that lets you go negotiate a really good deal for buying the house at a lower price. You're hopefully going to refinance later anyway, but these tax savings will help ease the pain
100%.
on those mortgage payments. So again, huge and important to plan ahead, plan constantly and continuously, and reevaluate and go from there. That was kind of what I wanted to say for tax strategies. I think those are big points. And again, the goal here is to just spark light bulbs so people ask more questions. This is not everything. There's a lot more to it. Definitely, this is not the type of thing that you do yourself. It is very easy to mess this up on a tax return too, missing certain check boxes and certain procedures that you have to attest to for the IRS to know what you're doing. So don't do it yourself. And again, with these tax saving, it's always my argument. Like with these tax saving, can you imagine that you're going to pay me more than what these tax savings are? I can't. It's not possible.
No.
So it's always going to be
It's
worth
always
it.
important to get it. It's kind of professional for sure.
You'll still save plenty,
Absolutely.
and you'll sleep well at night.
Yeah. And get just a good team. Just having, whenever you're doing any of these things, I think it's so important to hire the right team, the right professionals that work together in sync. And I think that that's kind of the secret sauce for a lot of our clients, is like being able to work with myself and you and Kristen, and like having, and just locally here in Austin specifically, but wherever your market is, wherever you live, just finding kind of people who are connecting with other people who know what they're doing to be able to really build out a really good wealth building strategy for you, and tax saving strategy as well.
Yeah, huge. So now I want to kind of bring it back to what you do, and how you got here. So, you moved to Austin. I assume you worked, with another brokerage, and then you eventually decided to branch off on your own, with Nook Realty now. And so what made you make that decision? Because obviously, you get so much support when you work for a brokerage, and now you have to do all the things on your own.
Totally.
Plus, eventually you want to grow and expand, and you have to do what they were doing for you. You have to do it for others now. That's a difficult transition.
No, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a big shift to be able to kind of make the decision to start your own brokerage. But I think for me, I think that I always knew that as much as I love selling real estate, I also really love working with people and like helping people grow, and just kind of being an entrepreneur myself. Like, I was thinking about all the ways that a brokerage can supply not only my own needs, right, but needs of other agents. And I really wanted to control the narrative of what we were representing. And I think that that's where Nook started, right? It was just the essence of Nook. Whenever I would walk into a house, even when I was shopping for myself, it was like, where's that little like safe space, that place where I feel homey? And that's kind of where the name Nook came from. And I wanted, that's what I wanted Nook to be in the market, a place where you could feel safe, whether you were an investor or a developer, somebody who was wanting to buy commercial land or a lease, or somebody who was looking to buy their first home, right? And their first starter home with their family. I think that having the ability to control a consumer's entry into the real estate market was really important to me. And I think that that's kind of where Nook derives from. It's definitely a lot of work, right? Like, owning your own business and managing independent contractors can be a challenge.
Hang on. Let alone that, managing yourself is fucking difficult. Edos, come here.
Absolutely. And especially, when you're, and as a real estate agent, you're, it's other agents, right? You don't really, I'm here for support of you, but you don't, you work with me and not for me.
Major key.
Right. And I think that that's kind of the big distinction. And also, like, I wanted to be able to provide value, right? I wanted to be able to provide value to not only the consumer, but also to the agents, and also understand that there's a certain expectation that is being able to met when you are a part of Nook, right? And with other brokerages, you don't always have that control. Not that you always have the control, but it's definitely a little bit easier to kind of have our own internal systems for how we do business, and continuing to grow that, and just hiring the right team and really creating the right environment for when somebody comes through whether it's agent, whether it's client, they know the process, they know what to expect. And I think that that was important to me as I continue to grow my real estate business. I was a top producer at my previous brokerage, and they were wonderful, and they really helped me, especially in a market that I didn't know as well as like where I came from. So it's just really important, I think, working with the right atmosphere for growth, especially in an industry like real estate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was always curious about this. I don't think this happens in New York, but I am curious about how it is in Austin. Like, do brokerages help each other out? Do they coordinate with each other and play things together, or is it not really like that?
Not really brokerages, right? I believe in collaboration with amongst between agents. Like, I believe that even if you're at a different brokerage and we're working together on a deal, we're working in collaboration. We're trying to figure out the best way possible to get these deals done. So your clients are happy and my clients are happy. That is not always the case.
Yeah.
Especially in places like New York.
Sure.
But I do feel like in Austin, that is something that we comes into play. I think that there's a lot of great agents out there that are amazing to work with, no matter what the brokerage is that they work for. But it's less of a collaboration of like resources. It's more a collaboration of like, this is the deal that we're working with. How can we work together to get your clients what your clients need and what my clients need? So then the transaction can be smooth. But
I guess I'm asking if it's a friendly place. That's sort of asking.
Austin's a fairly friendly place, but like any other place,
There's things. I got you. I got you.
there's always things. But
Because of all of New York and California that moved here, is that what it is?
yeah, it's definitely a part of it. It's a different market. It's fast moving, and I think that you had like kind of the new age realtor that's coming in and just like it's keeping up with the speed, and then you have the kind of these old school realtors that are they're just not used to how quickly the city is moving, and I think that that's kind of the difference. And some people are going to be pleasant to work with, and other people are not going to be as pleasant to work with. But
Okay.
just navigating that is always, it's the nature of any business.
Gotcha. So what's next for Nook?
What's next for Nook?
Where are you moving now? Because I know like you're starting to get more deals. You're trying to I guess sign on some agents, bring on some help, maybe expand to other markets. I don't know, like what's up next?
Definitely. I mean, Nook has gone through a major overhaul in the last 8 months, 9 months, just kind of with our internal systems, really creating kind of what Nook stands for. Like when you start any brokerage, you got to figure out who you are. What's your voice? What's the thing that you're serving? And I think now we're in a really good place to start talking about expansion, bringing on some new agents. We are looking to expand in other cities, especially feeder cities like California, New York, Florida are some of our big ones. So slowly starting to figure out how expansion is going to look. And then also just diversifying the services that we offer for our clients, right? Real estate, like I said, I'm an entrepreneur by nature, right? I love real estate and I'll always sell real estate in some capacity. But also just figuring out what are other needs that my consumers have, right? My clients are coming in for buying a home, but what are other things that they're looking for? And on the flip side of that, what are agents looking for, right? Like what are things that would make my life as an agent easier? Because as an agent, what I want to be focusing on is getting deals and making moves and connecting with people. And that's my job. That's my highest and best. So how do I offset a lot of the things that aren't my highest and best? And how do I systemize that? So just kind of looking at different things in the market, and we have a couple of things in the works, and just excited to kind of bring those to market. Property management is one of those. I'm going to start coming up pretty soon. We'll probably have that launched within the next couple of months. Which we're really excited about, just kind of getting a different approach to property management, and it's kind of archaic and old and really hard to kind of expect quality for certain property management companies. So I'm excited to kind of offer that to clients. And yeah, I think that's the long-term vision, and just kind of grow community, right? Like I think that people, I want to love what I do. And I think the way that I love what I do is like by building the right team and the right community around it, and whoever's, doing more events locally here in Austin and providing services in different ways. And whether that's like, hey, like I'm a big pickleball fan, and like, hey, these are the places to go play pickleball in Austin, and like build community and whatever that is for you. And I think that that's what the vision for Nook is long term, is just really being a place where we can connect and mastermind and grow together, whether you're a client or an agent that works with us.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a good way to wrap this up. I think I'll drop below the episode where people can find you and reach out if they have questions about anything or they want to schedule a call with you or your team. Yeah, on that note, thanks for doing this. Like I said, we've been talking about, I'm sure we'll do it again a few more times. Talk about other things.
We have so many other things to talk about.
Yes, the off-camera stuff.
Yeah.
All right. We'll wrap that up there. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Rob.
All right.